I had so much fun recently recording my video on Motorhead drummers throughout Motorhead's career. Four drummers they had. Four drummers. With Filthy Phil repeating twice. That I thought, I'll do one about the guitarist. The progression, not evolution, it's wrong with progression of guitarists. Anyway, from the start to the finish. Are the guitarists. It could be a slightly better video than keep making videos about my heart operation or the absolute state of English politics or something. Do something interesting. And I'm going to use my little acoustic here for dramatic emphasis because my electric's just humming to death, so I can't be bothered to keep turning it on and off, up and down. So they started off with Larry Wallis. Good guitarist from what I've heard, in my humble opinion on the thing. It's interesting that the album they made for United Artists, right, quite quickly, with Dave Edmunds producing it. I hear you knocking, famous like rock star Dave Edmunds went behind the desk. I think someone else finished it, but it's interesting the quality of that On Parole, which was released after Motorhead got famous or towards their peak, like 1979. I think United Artists put it out after they initially shelved it. The quality of it was much better than the. It's always that weird thing. You say the first album, which was Motorhead, the self-titled album, although really many Motorhead fans think Overkill was the real first album, like the first of the three classics, Overkill, Bomber, Ace of Spades, or the first three classics. But there was that one in '77, which was their false start, so to speak. But the quality of On Parole is much better than the self-titled album, which was essentially just sort of basically a live jam with some overdubs stuck in. There's that famous story that they were going to break up, and I won't go too much into the actual history, but they were going to break up and they booked the final gig at the Marquee, which was meant to be recorded, but something happened and it wasn't. But then they were offered that bit of recording down in Kent, a county in England, to record a farewell single, and they went down and they just barreled through their set. And there's always that famous story that they did it straight after they gig at the Marquee. Just took some more speed and plugged the instruments back in as soon as they got to Kent, which is a nice story, but bollocks. I think it was 2 weeks after they went down to Kent. But yeah, it was good. It got them up for a while. That proved a false start, but it's a rough recording, and On Parole wasn't. And getting back to the guitarist thing, it really showcases Larry Wallis's work. Quite a clever little songwriter as well. Some of his tracks like Fools and Vibrator and stuff. And it was kind of like, it's almost like there was two frontmen to me, Lemmy and him. They sort of share vocals and stuff. And the few live, although it's appalling sound quality, when they actually got it together and started playing, this is the weird thing. They always say that when they supported Blue Oyster Cult and they got the Hammersmith Odeon, the first one was an absolute disaster, and it said Blue Oyster Cult doing with sound check and stuff. It was like, yeah, but you could have at least tuned your guitars before you actually went on stage. You're doing a gig at the Hammersmith Odeon. I think the first thing is them going like this and stuff. So they didn't exactly endear themselves to the audience that way. But when it finally gets going, they quite often sing at the same time. I think they even sung Motorhead at the same time, two of them together. I might be wrong about that, but certain tracks they did. But Lemmy said him and Larry Wallis never really. So we used to rub against each other in a very non-sexual way. So Larry's a great warrior. If he's holding something, he'll always drop it on his foot, which I thought was an interesting. The camera's crooked. An interesting expression. And Larry was in some other bands as well at the same time. Was that one Pink Fairies? They used to do gigs with Hawkwind. They're called Hawk Fairies because Pinkwind didn't quite work out. I think it was Lemmy's, another one of Lemmy's brilliant quips. But so he couldn't commit any full time. Though he did a few basic tours, slogs around the UK from university type gigs when it was still known as Lemmy's Motorhead. I think that wound up Larry Wallis as well. Straight away, Lemmy was kind of getting the spotlight. I think it's the sheer force of his character and the charisma thing as much as anything else. He just jumps out of any photo or something straight away. Larry Wallis sort of big hair and sunglasses and stuff. So he didn't work, and well, they said Larry Wallis was pushing for another guitarist. He said, I want a rhythm guitarist so I can do my lead stuff, which I did in the studio. So they got in fast Eddie Clark, before Lemmy gave him his fast, whatever the word is, I think Supercare or something. And then apparently they had one jam. Well, Larry Wallis was really late, so fast Eddie Clark plugged in. And he always said he had to pay for his own audition. And they got going, him and Filthy and Lemmy, and they started playing. It was really good. He said Larry Wallis turned up much later, plugged in, played for about half an hour. He was so loud, no one else could hear what they were saying, which for me was quite an interesting situation. And then he went, and they never saw him again. That was it. There's a three of them. And then so of course the mighty Eddie Clark takes over. Just Eddie Clark. I could talk for 10 hours. Just Chuck Berry on speed. Brilliant rock and roll guitarist. All the swagger, the licks, and he did some great stuff with. Jesus, I should have researched names. It was Curtis Knight. Let me just check. It was he was a guitarist for Curtis Knight, as had been Jimi Hendrix. Curtis Knight, Eddie Clark. Let's type that. I'm sure I'm right about the name. Curtis Knight Zeus. Right, Zeus. Curtis Knight Zeus. Zeus. I'm slightly autistic, so don't laugh, everyone. Everyone's claiming affliction these days, aren't they? But yeah, I do sometimes misread things. That's my excuse. Young Eddie Clark or Curtis Knight Zeus. But if you listen to the album, apparently Curtis Knight Zeus, they said he became not famous but well known. First of all, he piggybacked on the fact that he'd had a Hendrix in his band, and then later on, after Eddie Clark got famous with Motorhead, that he'd had Eddie Clark in his band. But it's this great track. I think it's called People, Places and Things. The Curtis Knight Zeus with Eddie Clark. People, Places and Things. Anyway, it's a brilliant song, and it's already Eddie had that sort of great, just the licks and everything down, just a complete. Later on, interesting was all that they called. No, actually, the Human Riff is the name Keith Richards had, isn't it? They called something Wurzel something similar, because Wurzel arguably he put that hard rock element back into Motorhead. I'll come to that in a minute, but at the time that was Fast Eddie Clark, just great chords, and a lot of the sort of the root, third and the fifth, so many riffs like that, you know. I was gonna say Jail, but was it Jailbait? There's that, and then what's it? Well, No Class, which is basically Tush. Touch. How they got away with that, I don't know. They just completely ripped off that riff. But anyway, the point being is all that sort of root, fifth, third thing. And I mean, loads of stuff, Shoot You in the Back, Like a Nightmare. Just a little change of it. And I mean, straight from the very first single, they'd recycle this for, much more famously, for Overkill. But say the very first single they ever wrote, which was White Line Fever, you know. Straight away, the root, the minor third, as I should say, and the fifth, and of course they just chopped it around a bit for Don't Sweat It, Get It Back to You. So he brought all that kind of in when it went really to basic hard rock, basic but good. I don't mean basic as in it was too simplistic or something. Whereas Larry Wallis was more of a sort of, well, someone said his stuff was quite Stonesy, and I would agree with that one. Like listen to the On Parole album, like Fools and stuff. So it just went on. I mean, I want to get in all the guitarists on this, so I don't want too long about Eddie Clark. So it just carried on. They hit this formula. Eddie Clark said they hit a formula. He said you're barreling along having a laugh, you chuck a little twist into a riff you've done before, you change a little bit round, suddenly bingo, this is his words, paraphrasing slightly but not by much, he says suddenly you've got another track. You know, you're writing what do you want to play? Shoot You in the Back or something. And I was going to say it, suddenly you get another track out of it, but I can't remember what I was going to go to. But you see how closely linked those tracks are, and they were, a lot of the stuff is obviously knocked together in sound check, because they were just having to record constantly. A lot of the Bomber, I think, albums, you can hear the tracks were knocked up and rehearsed during sound check. Let's just quickly try that one. So they just hit their stride, they hit their formula, and for say the end of '78 when they played Hammersmith again, and Lemmy said that was when he said it's fully packed with 3,000 fans cheering us on, and Jerry Bron was there to check him out before he signed him to Bronze. It was meant to be a done deal, but he said I want to see him first. But he said as soon as he saw that, he thought I've got to get these guys. Yeah. So that's say November '78 when it finally starts to turn around for Motorhead, up until Fast Eddie's departure, whether he quit or was thrown out. You know, they kind of hit their stride, they hit that formula. The Iron Fist album, which I think mainly suffered from bad production. The production is shit of Iron Fist. So same with Rock and Roll. I think 5 years later, Rock and Roll. It's great tracks. I always say listen to the demos that were done with Vic Mail before Filthy Animal Taylor had a fit and refused to work with Vic anymore. The demos are fantastic. I Don't Need Religion. It's called Peter Gunn. You know, theme, which it quite sounds like. Brilliant sound. And then Fast Eddie Clarke, Doug Smith, the manager, to try and save some money, convinced Eddie Clarke to produce it, and it just sounded like crap. But there's great tracks on there. It just suffers because of crap production. But they said they were running out of riffs and stuff. And then anyway, Eddie Clarke left, as everyone knows, and they got Robbo in, and much more melodic. This is when Fourth started to come into the band. You know, the old Pete Townsend. Well, he's famous for using, not just Pete Townsend at all. You know, I'm trying to play Pinball Wizard there and failing miserably. But anyway, you know, I Got Mine. I mean, Eddie would not have played anything like that. He could have done. And another thing that the snobs like to say is, oh, technically a far superior guitarist, you know, Robbo as opposed to Eddie. Yeah. Brilliant lead guitar. I mean, like I say, Eddie was Chuck Berry on speed. It's like I think one of the best songs ever is Chuck Berry, No Particular Place to Go. He plays a solo in the middle. It's just one note, and it's just awesome. It just blows me away. And Eddie was like that, though Eddie could play many notes. He was apparently called fast for his guitar playing, not for his ability to charm women, shall we say, as he later claimed when he told the guitarist of the band I was in, I played bass, the one he managed. He claimed that one, but apparently it was because he was a fast guitar player. I mean, Robbo was a sort of, I'd have to say, yeah, he knew more scales or something. It wasn't so like rock and roll. But they're both brilliant guitarists. It's just chalk and cheese, that's all. Apples and bananas or something. Both brilliant guitarists, just in different ways. So Eddie would not have been able to replicate Robbo's solos, shall we say. And when Robbo tried to sort of play the older stuff, the classic stuff, he overplayed a lot of it, and he'd use loads of effects. As Shoot You in the Back, he'd start using all the guitar effects. Lemmy says some guitar synthesizer. And it's just, mate, just stop using all this crap. And the fourths, you go, Shoot You in the Back. They're all false. But he started doing this. Someone wrote in the comments of a YouTube video, said no fourths in Motorhead. But that's when he started to. He tried to make it more. I mean, Motorhead was Zen, like less is more. But it started. But on the other hand, it stifled a guitarist like Robert. You have to like the music, otherwise, yeah, you're not going to want to be in a band like Motorhead, because it's not. You know, you're not playing loads of different time signatures and stuff. You know, you're not joining Frank Zappa's band. It's well, you know, as it, you know, as everyone knows what Motorhead is. But I think there's friction with Lemmy. They did like each other deep down, but Lemmy said it was only one of my bandmates that ever threatened with violence, and Robbo was no stranger to having a punch up. I don't know, he had this reputation as like being really hard and mean, but he just looks, well, it's probably just, I don't know, size of the dog in the fight, I suppose, but he always looks like he's like 6 stone, about a break and a half, Robbo, with all the drinking and stuff. He looked kind of ill when he even was like 25 or 26, I was when he joined Motorhead. I mean, they said Eddie, Fast Eddie Clark, was Lemmy said seriously bad news when the fists start flying. And when I met Eddie, he looked really, really capable. I mean, I met him when he was my age, actually, God above, when he was 49. Came to a gig I played at the Robert Peel in Kingston, which is long since gone. It's flats now. But yeah, Eddie, you would have probably not wanted to upset. He had a slightly wonky nose as well, looked like he'd received a few. And of course I saw stories of him and Phil Campbell Taylor bashing 7 bells out of each other. Anyway, yeah, so, but let me say, there was only a member of his band he threatened with violence, and Robbo said he threatened to wrap a chair around Lemmy's head and all this good old stuff. So he was never going to last the course, really, was he, Robbo? And he, for all the dressing up and the weird clothes and stuff, he kind of made himself not really tenable. So we went, and they got in the 2 guitarists, meant to be 1 guitarist, both basically unknown. They always say like Phil Campbell, was an up and coming band, Persian Risk, but they were just basically, they weren't known at all. Wurzel was his last shot basically. I think he was 34, 35 when he joined Motorhead. And his letter to Lemmy, he read in New Musical Express. He said, we're looking for an unknown guitarist. And he said, I hear you're looking for someone unknown, and there's no one more unknown than me. It was basically his last shot, because he said, I know I'd never be properly happy, if I wasn't in a band playing rock and roll, but I'd done all the pubs and everything. I thought, where do I go from here? So it's kind of his last shot. And Lemmy said he was hyper nervous at the audition, and had to be given vodka to stop him shaking. Whereas Phil Campbell was like completely off his nut on like 2, and nailed the audition. And it came down to 2 of them, and Lemmy eventually chose them both. I think it's quite often, it seems, Phil Campbell ultimately he really came good just as a long-lasting, solid member. But I think he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. I think even Lemmy in the end said to him, he was always leaving the band and throwing strops, or threatening to leave the band and throwing strops and stuff. And Lemmy eventually said to me, you're going to have to stop leaving the band, or I'm going to let you. They've been talking him back in. And eventually said, if you're going to do it, next time you're gone. And Phil Campbell stopped straight away. So I think he was he's only young, as to be fair. He was like 23 or 24 when he joined. He might have been younger, 22. So it was always 10 years between him and Wurzel. But I saw an interview with Phil Campbell. This was quite later on. This is in the 2000s. I like playing pranks on journalists, and this guy comes, I think he's Dutch, this interviewer, and he's got some questions. And Phil Campbell just basically takes the piss out of this bloke, just insults him, mocks him. He's got his glasses, and he's trying to pretend he can't hear or he can't see properly or something. He's got these silly big glasses and these weird ear things. And to be honest, he just came across like a bit of a prick. One thing I really liked about Lemmy was, if he's getting interviewed by people and their English isn't that great, but you can see they're trying, they're making an effort, he'll really try and he'll slow down his speech, even if he's speeding, and he'll take what they're saying seriously and try to give them a proper answer, not just rip the piss out of them. I didn't like that at all, and I heard he was Phil Campbell was quite prone to that sort of thing, just acting up basically. Wurzel completely opposite, down to earth, very modest man, funny, great guitarist, as is Phil Campbell, brilliant guitarist. Liked his beer. Sadly, I think that's one of the things it did for him. I think alcohol became quite a problem in later life. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't sell this, but I saw him in an interview in 2005, and he's only 55. Only I have to say these things now because I'm nearly 50. I couldn't believe it. He looked not well at all. He's struggling for breath and stuff. He's smoking a lot. Rock and roll lifestyle. Yes, and that they really took it back to. I mean, the first songs, you know, they released before they stuck on No Remorse, you know. Stagger. Straight back to it, thirds of fifths, minor thirds, fifths in the root note. And excuse me, I keep polishing my hooter. I haven't had the cocaine. I've just got an itchy nose. Yeah, that one was by Phil Campbell, and of the two that I really, you know, Killed by Death was Wurzel. And Wurzel says straight away. There's a long interview of Wurzel on YouTube. I'll try and get a link to it. And Wurzel says straight away there was a very easy rapport with him and Campbell. There was no like arguing over the solos or something. Everything was kind of very neatly divided. One of the main criticisms of the two guitar lineup is quite often they're just playing the same thing. Someone said with Lemmy's bass as well, it's like having tits on a bull. If two guitarists are just going, you know, other things like I'm so bad, babe, I don't care. They'd be playing that. One of them was slightly out of tune, so it would be quite. I mean, I know it's Motorhead, so people probably didn't even notice in the actual live setting, but that can be quite painful sometimes. Stuff like that, if one of the guitarists is out of tune with the other. It wasn't the Lizzie thing of having. They rarely did. They did it once on a live Hellraiser. It's on an American chat show. They play that and Going to Brazil. They actually the harmony lines. It was really good. You know, but otherwise they rarely did that. One thing that interesting they did was on the 1916 album on No Voices in the Sky. They just really like the rhythms. This one, you know, and the other one's done. They're just playing different rhythms of the same chords. That really worked. But otherwise, they rarely did. Not rarely, but they often just played the same thing. As someone said, like having tits on a ball. That. And then so it moved along, and again, this comes to the interview I saw of Wurzel. I'd heard it elsewhere, but Wurzel started to get really pissed off with, I think from, what's the first song they started to feature acoustics? I think it was No More, I Ain't No Nice Guy with Ozzy, 1992, No March or Die album. And Wurzel was like, oh, and he was rock. He was like Eddie Clark. He was like rock. He said, I've no time for acoustics in rock music, or with Motorhead certainly. I think he begrudgingly let they knew they really needed a hit, which they tried to get with Ozzy, and they had that nightmare situation of their record company actively trying to kill that track, when it could have been much bigger than it was. He sort of let that one go. Then he said suddenly we had to have these acoustic, you know, Next Swing's Bastards, like, which I think I don't like that track. Don't Let Daddy Kiss Me. Yeah. He said we started to have that, so he refused to play on them. He just said when the electric came in, he'd go on that. So I think he started to like Phil Campbell started to experiment with different tunings and stuff, and Wurzel didn't like that. He was very, you know, this works, just if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of guy. And I think that really wound him up. And apparently he was tired of life on the road or something. He never really took to America, and then there's a big bust up. He was trying to nail a solo for about 2 hours and eventually just disappeared out of the studio one day, and then he accused Lemmy of like nicking his money and stuff. It's in Lemmy's autobiography, White Line Fever. And that's a whole different story, but anyway, he was gone. And you know, the last time they did with him was Sacrifice, which to me, it's not one of my favourite albums. I just find it too like cod metal. I don't know how to describe it. It just seems it's too sort of yeah, war for war. Yeah, it's not like at Motorhead. They kind of, it's hard and heavy as heck, but it's clever as well, and they do different things. Which leads me to the next album they did of Phil Campbell, where this is where Phil Campbell really starts to come into his own. Was Overnight Sensation, which I think really clever album, lots of different types of styles and stuff, but keeping their Motorhead thing. You instantly know it's Motorhead. But you know, yeah, just lots of different types of song ideas and stuff. A brilliant album. Apparently Mickey D, it was meant to be about guitarists, but Mickey D wanted it to be a lot heavier, and he nearly left the band. And he was like, "No, it's fine. It's a great album." And I think he was right. It's really good. Just mix. It's nice. Yeah, lots of different. Crazy like a fox going into Don't Believe a Word. Just mix it all up. Not just a constant do 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 do. You know, drop D sludge fest. I need half an hour, so I'll just wrap this up. I could say much more, but you know. So just I say Phil Campbell, my sort of personal whatever. Who cares, you know? But my personal gripes way sometimes seems to treat people who are trying to interview him and basically support and promote his band, as opposed to how Lemmy was very courteous for his reputation as a hellraiser. But Phil Campbell, to give him his due, he kept that. He was solid, reliable, and produced great albums after that going on, especially like Inferno in 2004. And again, keeping the Motorhead thing, but playing around it, doing different ideas and keeping it fresh, which I think they really did. Really almost up to the end, no matter how sick Lemmy got, there were still great tracks. And the fourth even came in, I think, with the When the Sky Comes Looking For You, What are you gonna do now? Brilliant track. So the fourth finally came in and was back in. And yeah, then him and Mickey supporting Lemmy right to the end as he saw out his life and the way he wanted to go, on almost to the end on stage, almost, until he really, really could be on stage no more with head and neck cancer and all sorts. So that's my little take on. I've kind of like mixed up a very potted history of Motorhead there, but some interesting guitars through the years. Never a bad one as far as I'm concerned. Very different styles, and they all contributed to the legend that remains Motorhead.